The Grand Hyatt's ballrooms sparkled with old money and new ambition as I adjusted my simple gray suit Tom Ford, though they'd never recognize subtle quality. My father's 65th birthday celebration was a who's who of corporate America, all of them clients of Davidson Corp, and none of them knowing that their contracts were about to be terminated by my tiny consulting firm. "Look who finally showed up," my brother Michael's voice carried across the marble floor. "Still playing business owner with that little company of yours, Emma?" I suppressed a smile, thinking about the server farm that powered half of America's biggest corporations, all running through Sterling Enterprises, my supposedly insignificant consulting firm that had quietly become the backbone of modern business infrastructure. "Hello, Michael," I said quietly, accepting a glass of champagne. "Congratulations on the merger announcement." He smirked, straightening his flashy Rolex. "Not that you'd understand corporate strategy, but Davidson Corp is about to become the largest consulting firm in North America. If he only knew that every major client he was counting on in that merger was actually contracted through one of my shell companies. 5 years of careful planning was about to pay off." "Emma, darling," my stepmother Victoria's voice dripped with false concern. "Still working out of that little office downtown? We really must find you a proper job." The little office was actually the entire building. I owned it through one of my holding companies. But they'd never bothered to look past the modest suite where I took family meetings. My phone buzzed silently, a message from my COO. "All systems ready. Client notifications queued." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows I could see the Davidson Corp headquarters, its logo illuminated against the night sky. In exactly 47 minutes, that building would be worth half its current value. "Remember when Emma said she was starting her own company?" Michael laughed to a group of executives. "Dad, you should have forced her to stay at Davidson Corporation. Now she's stuck running some tiny tech shop while we're building an empire." My father, James Davidson, barely glanced in my direction. "Some people have to learn the hard way that business is for serious players." I checked my watch. 45 minutes until every major corporation in America would receive notice that their essential tech services were being transferred from Davidson Corp to direct contracts with Sterling Enterprises. "Still using that old laptop?" Michael nodded at my sleek computer. "When you're ready to admit failure, I'm sure we can find you something entry-level at Davidson Corporation." If he only knew this old laptop was controlling systems that made his entire corporate infrastructure possible. But that's the beauty of real power. It doesn't need to show off. My phone buzzed again, my legal team confirming that all termination notices were legally bulletproof. In less than an hour, the corporate giant that had dismissed me as a failure would learn that they'd been operating at my mercy all along. Sometimes the smallest consulting firm holds the biggest cards. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael's voice boomed through the sound system. "In 40 minutes, Davidson Corp will announce a merger that will reshape the consulting industry forever." I took another sip of champagne, watching the theater unfold from my quiet corner. The room was filled with CEOs and corporate leaders, all of them about to learn who really controlled their company's technological infrastructure. "Emma's still playing entrepreneur," Victoria stage whispered to a cluster of society wives. "Though I suppose someone has to handle the small accounts." My phone lit up with another message. My chief technology officer this time. "Server transition protocols in place. Ready to execute on your command." The irony was delicious. While they'd been mocking my small accounts, Sterling Enterprises had been building the most sophisticated tech infrastructure in business history. Every major corporation in that room depended on my systems. They just didn't know it yet. "Miss Davidson?" A waiter approached, actually my head of operations, Alex Chin, maintaining our cover. "Everything is prepared as requested." I nodded slightly. "And the backup systems?" "Ready to activate the moment Davidson Corp's access is terminated." Michael was holding court near the main table, his voice carrying. "Once we announce the merger with Global Consulting Group, Davidson Corp will control 40% of the corporate consulting market." If he only knew that Global Consulting Group's entire infrastructure ran on Sterling Enterprises systems. One push of a button and their operations would grind to a halt. "Emma," my father finally acknowledged me, "at least try to look professional. This is what real business looks like." I met his gaze calmly. "Oh, I'm very interested in real business, Dad. In fact, I wouldn't miss tonight's announcement for anything." Victoria sauntered over, champagne in hand. Darling, why don't you tell everyone about your little company? What is it you do again? Something with computers. Something like that, I smiled, thinking about the quantum servers that powered global finance. Just trying to keep up with the big players. My phone buzzed, the legal team again. All client notifications reviewed and approved. Termination clauses ironclad. Through the windows, the city skyline glittered with possibility. Each building housed companies that relied on Sterling Enterprises technology, though they thought they were Davidson Corp clients. 25 minutes until we make history, Michael announced, raising his glass. To Davidson Corp, the future of corporate consulting. I checked my watch and opened my laptop. On the screen, a simple dashboard showed the status of every major corporation's tech infrastructure. One click would reveal who really controlled the business world. Still using that ancient technology? Michael smirked, nodding at my laptop. Davidson Corp uses state-of-the-art systems. You mean Sterling Enterprises systems, I said quietly, but he had already turned away, too busy basking in his imagined success. The CNBC reporter in the corner was preparing for a live broadcast. She thought she was covering a merger announcement. Instead, she'd be reporting on one of the most dramatic corporate revelations in history. Dad, Michael called out, should we give them a preview of the announcement? My father stood, straightening his tie. Davidson Corp isn't just growing, we're revolutionizing the industry. Every major corporation in America trusts us with their most critical operations. I took another sip of champagne, thinking about how those critical operations all ran through my servers. Alex appeared again. Ma'am, the transition protocols are armed. One word from you. I nodded, watching Michael preen for the cameras. He had no idea that while he was practicing his merger speech, I'd been preparing to show him what real corporate power looked like. Around the room, executives were gathering for the big announcement. Victoria was showing off her new diamond necklace, a gift from Michael to celebrate the merger. Breaking news, the CNBC reporter suddenly said, touching her earpiece. We're receiving reports of unusual activity in corporate tech systems. Michael's smile faltered as he checked his phone. Dad? Something's happening with our client portals. Ladies and gentlemen, the reporter's voice cut through the growing murmurs. Multiple major corporations are reporting simultaneous system changes. I stood up, opened my laptop and pressed a single key. Across the room, every phone, tablet and computer screen lit up with the same message. Notice. Effective immediately, all corporate technology services previously attributed to Davidson Corp will be transferred to their actual provider, Sterling Enterprises. For inquiries, please contact CEO Emma Davidson. The silence was deafening. The first signs of panic began to ripple through the crowd. CEOs frantically checked their phones, watching as their company dashboards switched from Davidson Corp's logo to Sterling Enterprises. This has to be a mistake, Michael stammered, his perfectly crafted image cracking. Some kind of system glitch. My phone rang, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, his voice echoing through the suddenly quiet ballroom as I put it on speaker. Ms. Davidson. Emma. Our entire trading platform just identified Sterling Enterprises as our core technology provider. How long has this been the case? Since the beginning, I replied calmly. Davidson Corp has been essentially a front for my company's services for the past 5 years. The color drained from my father's face as similar calls began flooding in. Bank of America, Microsoft, Tesla. Every major corporation discovering that their critical infrastructure was controlled not by the mighty Davidson Corp, but by the tiny consulting firm they dismissed. Impossible, Victoria whispered, clutching her champagne glass. Emma just has that small office. You mean the pilot office? I smiled slightly. The real Sterling Enterprises headquarters occupies 50 floors of that building. I own it, by the way, along with most of the tech district. The CNBC reporter was now broadcasting live. In an unprecedented development, it appears that Sterling Enterprises, led by Emma Davidson, has been the actual provider of critical technology services to over 70% of Fortune 500 companies. Michael lunged forward, his expensive suit suddenly seeming cheap and flashy. You can't do this. The merger. With Global Consulting Group? I raised an eyebrow. You mean the company whose entire operation runs on my quantum servers? Let's call their CEO, shall we? I pressed another key on my laptop. The ballroom screens lit up with a video call to Global's chief executive. Emma. He nodded respectfully, to me, not my stunned family. I assume it's time? Indeed, I replied. Please clarify for everyone here. Who actually provides your company's tech infrastructure? Sterling Enterprises, he said without hesitation. Has for years. Davidson Corp was just the public face we were asked to maintain. The screens around the room showed real-time data. Corporate systems smoothly transitioning to direct Sterling Enterprises management, stock tickers beginning to react, business news headlines updating by the second. 5 minutes until Asian markets open, Alex murmured. Davidson Corp's stock will collapse, I finished quietly. The merger was the only thing propping up their valuation. And that's not happening anymore. The next few minutes unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of corporate destruction. Davidson Corp's stock plummeted in after-hours trading as news of the failed merger spread. My father gripped the edge of the nearest table, watching his empire crumble in real time on the ballroom's screens. Current market reaction suggests Davidson Corp's value will drop 60% by morning, the CNBC reporter announced. Meanwhile, Sterling Enterprises, previously unknown to most investors, is being valued at over $50 billion. $50 billion? Michael choked out. That's impossible. She just has that small consulting firm. I smiled, pulling up Sterling Enterprises' complete portfolio on the ballroom screens. Actually, brother dear, I have the largest tech infrastructure company in the world. Those small accounts you mocked? They include 80% of global financial transactions, 70% of cloud computing services, and 90% of corporate AI operations. Victoria stumbled forward, her designer dress suddenly seeming gaudy. But we've been to your office. That tiny space. Where I meet family members who think success is measured by square footage. I raised an eyebrow. My real office is at the top of the Sterling Tower. The one you can see from this window, the building that's 3 times taller than Davidson Corp's headquarters. My phone was buzzing constantly now, CEOs, board members and investors all realizing who really controlled the corporate world's technological backbone. Ms. Davidson, Apple CEO's voice came through the speakers. We need to discuss our direct contract terms. Of course, I replied. My team will send over the new agreements. Though I should warn you, our rates are significantly higher than what Davidson Corp was charging. The screens showed the numbers that made my family's fortune look like pocket change. Sterling Enterprises' quantum computing division alone was worth more than Davidson Corp at its peak. But why? My father finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Why hide behind Davidson Corp all these years? I walked to the window looking out at the city where I'd built my hidden empire. Because you taught me an important lesson, Dad. When you told me my little consulting firm would never compete with real companies, you showed me the power of being underestimated. The CNBC reporter was still broadcasting. Sterling Enterprises' technology appears to be years ahead of competitors. Sources say their quantum computing systems are already powering the next generation of corporate infrastructure, I finished. While Davidson Corp was arranging merger photos, we were revolutionizing how business operates. Michael made one last desperate attempt. The clients won't stand for this. They have contracts with us. Actually, I pulled up another document. They have contracts with shell companies that all lead back to Sterling Enterprises. Davidson Corp was essentially subletting my technology, at a fraction of its real value, I might add. Alex approached with a tablet. Ma'am, the Pentagon is calling. They want to discuss the quantum encryption project. Tell them I'll call back, I said. Family matters first. Victoria's social climbing instincts kicked in. Darling, surely we can work something out? Keep this in the family. Oh, this is very much a family matter, I smiled. In fact, I just bought controlling interest in Davidson Corporation. Your stock may be crashing, but I've been quietly acquiring shares for years. As of tonight, your company is a wholly owned subsidiary of Sterling Enterprises. The color drained from my father's face. You took over my company? No, Dad. I built something so much bigger that your company became irrelevant. The merger you were counting on? I killed it because it would have actually decreased Sterling's market share. The screens showed the true scope of Sterling Enterprises. Offices in 60 countries, revolutionary technology patents, corporate systems that made Davidson Corp's infrastructure look like ancient history. Tomorrow morning, I continued, every Davidson Corp employee will receive 2 offers. Join Sterling Enterprises with a significant raise, or accept a generous severance package. Unlike some people, I believe in taking care of the people who do the actual work. Michael slumped in his chair. All this time, while we were laughing at your small business. You were actually working for me, I confirmed. Every major client, every big contract, it all depended on Sterling's technology. You just didn't know who really owned the systems. My phone buzzed again, Elon Musk this time. The Mars colony computing contract can wait, I told Alex. I'm enjoying this moment. The ballroom had become a chaos of ringing phones and panicked conversations as executives realized their company's operations depended on my technology. The Davidson Corp logo on the wall seemed to dim in the face of Sterling Enterprises' rising star. But the small office. Victoria was still stuck on appearances. The basic laptop. The simple suits. Because real power doesn't need to show off, I said. Success isn't measured in flashy watches or designer labels. It's built in server farms and code bases and technological innovations that change how the world works. I walked to my father's chair. Happy birthday, Dad. Consider this your wake-up call. While you were teaching Michael how to look successful, I was actually building something that matters. The screens showed Sterling Enterprises' latest projects. Quantum networks revolutionizing global communication, AI systems transforming industries, clean energy technology powering the future. Ms. Davidson, the reporter approached. Sources say Sterling Enterprises is about to announce several major new initiatives. Indeed, I smiled. Starting with the complete modernization of global corporate infrastructure. Davidson Corp was just the first domino to fall. As if on cue, my phone lit up with notifications, other consulting firms discovering their dependence on Sterling's technology, their stocks beginning to slide as the market realized who really controlled the corporate world's backbone.